breaking them up into groups, asking them to go through a chapter, reviewing what's been going on, trying to understand what are the economic issues, what are the social issues, what are the technical issues, what are the geologic issues, what are the sort of regulatory issues, and how does all this fit together. And in the process of doing this, as I said, since I grew up here in Ohio, I've been in touch with a lot of folks here and said, well, do you know the Marcellus and Utica shales, which are two large shale fields that run all the way through New York, down through Pennsylvania, and the eastern part of Ohio and West Virginia. And those areas are starting to see a lot more gas exploration, particularly the Utica shales, where overlays more of this area, but the Marcellus in particular is what we're looking at in New York, and also here to a degree. They said, well, we're seeing a lot more discussion. The DNR and the Division of MRM, Mineral Resource Management, are doing reviews. We're looking at a lot of these issues here in Ohio. What's going on? What are the problems? What are the concerns? What are the benefits? And I said, well, I've been teaching some of this in New York and going through thinking some of these things. I'm happy to share some of the insights what we've been learning, challenges, and adventures in New York. So that's basically what I want to sort of talk about today. But before I do that, I'm unsure how many people here even know the basics of what fracking is, how it happens, and I don't want to spend 20 minutes giving you guys an undergraduate lecture on the technical aspects of mining, because some of you may already do this for a living or know how it works, so I don't want to bore you. How many people here have a basic understanding of how what's known as fracking, an abbreviation, works? Okay, so a few people that don't. Very briefly. So imagine we're going 4,000 to 6,000 feet below the ground. We're running piping down, metal casings, going down, and then usually going over at an angle into these shale plays that have lots of oil in them. You pump high volume water mixed with what's known as proppants, which are usually sand, small mix of chemicals. That goes through and essentially fractures that shale and allows the gas to then start slowly migrating back to the surface, and then that's essentially how we gather the gas. So one of the things that makes the sort of, particularly the high HVHF fracking different is that you're using a large amount of water. Estimates range depending on the size of the well, if you're doing a single well on a pad or you're doing multi-wells on one pad, so you can have a single or you can have multiple wells all drilled from one pad. So if you have kids that play with Legos, imagine the little gray square you build off of, imagine that as a pad, and you can do multiple sort of drills off of that. Well, depending, you could use anywhere from about 1 million to upwards of 7 million gallons during that whole process when you're producing gas. And you're also mixing that with chemicals. So in New York in particular, because our entire drinking water system for the city essentially comes from up in the Catskills in the northern part of New York, it's essentially all unfiltered water. So other than a little bit of chlorine treatment, the city water that most New Yorkers drink hasn't really been treated, doesn't go through a lot of the extensive sewage treatment processes or chemical processes maybe that go through in a lot of states. Now, if you're drinking well water, obviously it's a little bit different. But so in New York, we said, okay, we're going to be using trillions of gallons of water over the course of the next 30 years as we're drilling thousands and thousands of new wells. And so we need to think about what are the impacts when we use all this water. Additionally, the numbers vary depending on the companies, but there's 300 or more various chemicals that can be used. These range from biocides to kill fungicide, to kill fungus in the pipes. You've got lubricants, you've got a whole range of different chemicals that are used essentially to make this process work better. And one of the concerns a lot of people have is some of these chemicals we've been using for a long time and we understand them more or less well. Others are relatively new or are new in the sense of introducing them directly into contact with possible water sources that could end up then being drunk. So in New York in particular, the state DEC, which is sort of like ODNR here in Ohio, said, okay, we're going to update these provisions and these guidelines and try to think about what are these various impacts. So as everyone here probably knows, we're not living in the great economic times that we were in the past, and so one of the issues that we're dealing with is how do we create jobs, not just in Ohio or New York, but everywhere. So obviously when you have thousands and thousands of acres of new gas fields possibly opening up, that's a huge number of jobs you're looking